So, welcome to Inside the Lords. It's been quite an interesting week. The Levelling Up Bill, which is a bill which apparently the Tories are going to solve all the problems of social inequality in one piece of legislation, is proving to be the most unruly, ridiculous piece of legislation ever. And one of the reasons for that is because it's so general, it covers things like transport, planning, housing, a whole range of issues, largely centering around newly devolved powers being given out to a whole new set of mayors. It's already an enormous bill, but, and this is a historic first, certainly since I've been in the Lords, but everybody says it is, there are about 500 amendments being put to the bill because it's a bit of a so vague a bill that everyone is throwing amendments at it. And my God, the Lords is full of ex-council leaders and local government people, and they really like this sort of thing. The Lib Dems are in their element. And as a consequence of which, I have got one amendment, I've had one amendment, I've got another amendment coming up on leasehold, one of my issues around housing, and I'm also supporting a range of amendments on housing supply. And we were supposed to be discussing those amendments 2 weeks ago. But since then, there's been so slow a progress with so many amendments and with so many Lib Dems speaking endlessly and at great length that we haven't got to them yet. So I have been in the House of Lords very late on several occasions, waiting for my amendment to come up, knowing it would never come up because they were all rambling on, and that's where we're at. One of the things that's apparent from this bill, and that I understand that people don't get this, is you can just hear in the press, and why would you be following this other than in the press, that there's a Levelling Up bill going through the House of Lords. So you won't realise that this has become a bill that, rather than actually allowing development to happen throughout the country, because the idea of levelling up is that wherever you live, you will have equal treatment of those people in London and the South, and all the opportunities won't be confined to London and so on and so forth. This is actually going to be a bill that will stop anything ever being built. Ever. Forget housing supply, forget roads, forget infrastructure, because the predominant amendments that have gone in have been from environmental supporting Lords, not just the Green Party. There is a group of peers who I think are called Peers for the Planet. They have spoken a huge amount. They have put in endless amendments. And so whenever anybody says we've got to level up by building something, they'll say, yes, but don't forget the hedges, the newts, the this, the that, the planet. I'm caricaturing, but not that much. And that's one of the reasons why this bill has got stuck. So it's driving me mad, and it's an exasperating experience. I actually, usually at committee stage, there's 8 days of committee. This was extended to 10 days of committee for the Levelling Up bill, and we are now, I think, at day 9, and we are not even halfway through the number of amendments. So it will be a historic first in the number of committee days allocated to it. And I can safely say that I don't believe that anything will level up, nothing will ever be built. It's demoralising and irritating. And you might have seen my speech during the week where I lost my temper with Baroness Jenny Jones from the Green Party, because she just epitomised to me why my frustrations. I just sort of lashed out. There we go. That's on that. The other thing that's happened this week was, of course, the Windsor Framework came to the House of Lords. The whole discussion around Northern Irish Protocol was, given its due time in the House of Lords. And the funny thing about it is the usual role of the House of Lords, apparently anyway, is to scrutinise legislation made in the House of Commons. But in this instance, because at the House of Commons stage, Rishi Sunak had made sure that the Windsor Framework was turned into only a vote on a statutory instrument which concerned the Stormont break, that meant that when it came to the House of Lords, all that we could do was nod it through. So I was really gratified that at least a member of the DUP Lord Morrow had put in a fatal amendment that would have meant that it was going to, it's the only way you can affect a statutory instrument is try and kill it off with what's known as a fatal amendment. He put that in, which allowed a debate, and apparently the government whips and the opposition whips and so on had decided, well, we better let the loyalists have their, day in court, as it were, let them trundle on a bit, but it won't take long. 3.5 hours later, we were still at it, and we forced a vote. Now, I'm not a supporter of the DUP. I'm not a unionist in that traditional sense, but I am infuriated about the fact that the whole process of introducing this Windsor Framework has been completely against the spirit of any kind of democratic scrutiny by anyone. I mean, we've left the EU, but if you actually look at the content of the Windsor Framework, the EU, through this framework, will actually have a say over the legislative process of the UK in the future. I mean, new laws. In fact, they're writing the laws that are going to decide on what happens in terms of the internal market of the United Kingdom. I mean, it's preposterous. And yet somehow we're all meant to celebrate this. So we had our chance to rant. The whips were furious, but at least we got it on the record, and we forced a vote, even though we lost dramatically. I think it was something like 213 to 14 of us bravely marched in to try and kill off the Windsor Framework. We did do it for history and the history books, and because for the public, they should know what's going on, because this has been a hidden process. It's also the case, by the way, that those voting figures indicate that a huge number of people abstained. I mean, on a big whipped vote, as they say, you'd get 500-600 people over the course of a big vote like that. So the fact that so many people didn't vote is, I think, something we can be pleased about. Only, I think, 2 or 3 Conservative peers voted with us on the 14. It was Kate Hoey, myself, the DUP, and a couple of dissenters. And I was delighted, actually, that Charles Moore, Lord Moore of Etchingham, who's a non-affiliated, he actually said that he was going to abstain, but he said that having heard the speeches, he changed his mind and he voted against, or he voted with us. Anyway, that's what it's been like. So, what is the point of the House of Lords? Well, we know that I'm a great critic of it, but on occasion, I think that it allows us to shine a light on things which the House of Commons just skip over, because when the framework was discussed in the Commons, it was only given a 90-minute debate. There was really very little opposition, apart from the DUP, and there wasn't really an opportunity to at least show up what the government have tried to hide, and I think that's been a very important process. But it's also demoralising that the government feel that they can manipulate the public and parliamentarians in the way that they have done around the Northern Irish Protocol, and effectively sell out the spirit of Brexit and so on. Now, if I thought that politics was the palaces of Westminster, I'd be depressed after that week. The trundling on of the Lib Dem councillors and all the rest of it on regeneration, the Windsor Framework being a sellout, Brexit being betrayed. I mean, that's enough to depress you. Luckily, I believe that politics is alive and well outside of the House of Lords and of the Commons, and so we've just broken up for the Easter recess. So what am I going to be doing? Well, one thing I'm going to be doing is I'm going on Sunday to Speaker's Corner to join the Let Women Speak gathering, and I, in fact, will be one of the speakers. This is very much in solidarity with Posey Parker, who, as people will have seen, was physically, violently mobbed in New Zealand, but also last Sunday, when gender-critical supporters went out to argue at Speaker's Corner to put their case, they were also kettled in by a mob of trans ideology supporters who also brought amplification and loudspeakers into the park. The police looked the other way. And the reason, by the way, why you're not allowed to have amplification on Speaker's Corner, if people don't know, Speaker's Corner is where you will literally go and stand on a soapbox, a literal soapbox. And you're not allowed to have amplification because loads of people go and just kind of like spout on, and you can listen. It's a fine tradition, been going on for hundreds of years. It's really important. And if you obviously had somebody with loudspeakers, you would drown out somebody else. So you basically stand there and just shout, and it's like, your own voice projected. Anyway, I'm going to go on Sunday. Come and join us 3:00 at Speaker's Corner. And then next Thursday, I'm in Manchester. I've been invited by Nick Buckley to do an in-conversation and discussion about what's happening in British politics today, why people are politically homeless, what we feel we can do, whether that slogan of change politics for good that came out of Brexit is actually abandoned now, what's happened to populism, and some of the cancel culture, free speech discussions that we usually discuss. So I'll be doing that on Thursday. It's 6:30, 7:00 I think, starting in Manchester. I'll put a link below. During the Easter recess as well, I myself am going to spend a bit of time reading, thinking, catching up. And one of the things that I'm very excited about are some things that are happening in the longer term, which I hope that you'll come and join us for. My colleagues at the Ideas Matters charity, for example, are organising this fantastic event that I can't wait for, because it's the thing that keeps me going every year in terms of renewing my intellectual juices. And that's at the end of July. We've got the Academy, and you will have seen the Substack from last week about that, and that's the 28th to the 30th of July, and I'm going to be doing some of my reading and thinking in preparation for that, so check that out. But also I'm going to be thinking about what I'm going to say when I speak at another event, which is Living Freedom, which is organised for 18 to 30-year-olds to explore the ideas, history and philosophy of freedom. It's really to enable, it's a residential, and in fact so is the Academy, just 3 days. Living Freedom is to encourage young people to meet other people who are interested in working out the best arguments for free speech and freedom today, to really renew how we argue those things. And I'm one of the speakers at that. So if you know anyone between 18 and 30, get them to apply. That's Living Freedom, and that's happening the 29th of June for 3 days. So I suppose just to conclude, being in the House of Lords has been hugely instructive to me about how we won't change society in the way that we want to by confining ourselves to legislation, to parliamentary politics. It really is a sclerotic process on the one hand, but also so much bad faith. I don't want to encourage people to be cynical. I don't want people to say it's not worth trying. I go in there and try and argue as hard as I can for the kind of issues that I hope that you find useful to be made in that space. But in the end, the way that we're going to change things is outside of Parliament. So I'm going to renew my batteries over this Easter period. Hopefully see you on Sunday at Speaker's Corner. Back in the House of Lords on the 17th of April, where we'll be discussing the first day transport policy. So I will be raising ULEZ, the problems of low traffic neighbourhoods and those kind of favourite issues. The fact that the Mayor of London is bringing in a 20 mile an hour road, having 20 miles an hour, you can't drive more than that, you know what I mean? Basically the war on motorists. I'm going to be looking at some of that in that speech. And the following week after that, and this is the big thing I've got to prepare for, is we will start the online safety bill discussion in the Lords. That's going to go on for, I think, about 8 to 10 weeks of committee. I'm going to have some free speech amendments, but I'm going to be fighting off a huge number of amendments which have been put forward largely by the Labour Party and the Lib Dems and crossbenchers, but some Tory backbenchers, which, but guess what, are trying to make the online safety bill more censorious. So I've got to fight them off, put in amendments that actually makes free speech as a duty far more important. So catch up with you then.